a common strength when we're weary, a common hope for tomorrow, a common joy in the truth of God's word. A common strength when we're weary, a common hope for tomorrow, a common joy in the truth of God's word. A common love for each other, common gift to the Savior, common love holding us to the Lord. A common strength when we're weary, a common hope for tomorrow, a common joy in the truth of God's word. I serve a risen Savior is in the world today. I know that He is living, whatever men may say. I see His hand of mercy, I hear His voice of cheer. And just the time I need Him, He's always near. He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me along life's narrow way. He lives, salvation to impart. You ask me how I know He lives. He lives within my heart. In all the world around me, I see His loving care. And though my heart grows weary, I never will despair. I know that He is leading through all the stormy blasts. The day of His appearing will come at last. He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me along life's narrow way. He lives, salvation to impart. You ask me how I know He lives. He lives within my heart. Rejoice, rejoice, O Christian, lift up your voice and sing. Eternal hallelujah to Jesus Christ the King. The hope of all who seek Him, the help of all who find. None other is so loving, so good and kind. Jesus, blessed Jesus, Rose of Sharon, Rose of Sharon, bloom in radiance and in love within my heart. Jesus, Rose of Sharon, balm for every ill, may thy tender mercies healing power distill for afflicted souls of weary burden men, giving me immortals health and hope again. Jesus, blessed Jesus, Rose of Sharon, Rose of Sharon, bloom in radiance and in love within my heart. Jesus, Rose of Sharon, bloom forevermore. Be thy glory seen on earth from shore to shore, till the nations own thy sovereignty complete. Lay their honors down and worship at thy feet. Jesus, blessed Jesus, Rose of Sharon, Rose of Sharon, bloom in radiance and in love within my heart. 'Tis the blessed hour of prayer, when our hearts slowly bend, and we gather to Jesus, our Savior and friend. If we come to Him in faith, His protection to share, what a balm for the weary, what a sweet to be there. Blessed hour of prayer, blessed hour of prayer, what a balm for the weary, oh how sweet to be there. 'Tis a blessed hour of prayer, when the Savior draws near, with the tender compassion His children to hear. When He tells us we may cast at His feet every care, what a balm for the weary, oh how sweet to be there. Blessed hour of prayer, blessed hour of prayer, what a balm for the weary, oh how sweet to be there. At the blessed hour of prayer, trusting Him we believe, that the blessings we're needing will surely receive. In the fullness of this trust, we shall lose every care. What a balm for the weary, oh how sweet to be there. Blessed hour of prayer, blessed hour of prayer.
Lots of times we laugh together. Let's make sure it's more times the latter than the former. Picture this. God watches the evening news and realizes the world is such a mess that he sends an angel to organize a committee on earth of world leaders. And who does he choose? The Archbishop of the Church of England? The Pope? Perhaps the Dalai Lama? The Secretary General of the United Nations? Nope. In fact, he does better than that. He doesn't send an angel. He comes himself, Jesus, the Son of God. And who does he put together as this committee? He puts together a few fishermen, some tradesmen, a political activist. Actually, activist is too mild. A political radical, terrorist, or some would call him, and an IRS agent. Is that who you'd pick? All they really had in common was that they had been chosen by Jesus to follow him. And in the long run, he had a very important task for them. They would be left to represent him and to teach others to become followers of him and to keep reproducing this pattern of discipleship. Today we're going to take a little closer look at this IRS agent. And we're going to look at Mark chapter 2. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me." Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners." And I've got to ask this question. Why would he pick a guy like this? Now, you know he didn't actually work for the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. By this time, we know that John is called two sets of brothers, Peter and Andrew and James and John. They were all fishermen. Commercial fishermen. And then it looks like in the order of things, he next chooses Levi. Now Levi was in the same general area those guys were in, because you see there was a commercial route that led from Syria to Egypt that went right along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, where those brothers were fishermen. And the way this worked was the Romans had hired district revenue collectors. And those district revenue collectors would hire tax assessors, people to collect tariff on merchandise that was going back and forth. And so the fishermen had to pay a fee for the fish they brought in. And those who were trading in silk, and those who were trading in spices would have to pay a revenue as they came through the area of Galilee. And of course, the revenue would go to the Roman government. And we've talked about this before. The way these local tax collectors were paid was they were allowed to pay a service charge on top of the tax. And the difficulty in this was they were allowed to set what the service tax was, the service charge was. And so it could be 5%, or they could charge 30%. And there was nothing that the people could do about it. And the Roman government allowed that. And so it was common to charge a very heavy service fee, and the tax collectors became quite wealthy. In fact, they were some of the elite as far as financial resources in the area. You notice what Levi did when Jesus asked him to follow him. The next thing you see is that Levi is hosting a dinner party. Now, not everybody had the money to host that many people at their home, but Levi did. Not that many people had a home that was large enough to host that many people, but Levi did. Anyways, these fishermen that Jesus first called must have been thinking, what is he doing? He asked us to follow him, now he's asking a jerk like that to be part of the group as well? And they might have had second thoughts at that point. Levi had been labeled a sinner by the traditional religious people of his day, the faithful Jews, because they were devout believers in God, and the fact that he made an alliance with the Romans, the pagans, for this job, put them in a category of being not just suspect, but being definitely out of step with God. And so he was excluded from their fellowship, and he saw them as unapproachable and unloving, and they saw him as a traitor and unclean. You see, the rabbis had a rule: the disciples of the learned shall not recline at table in the company of Amha Arek. And that Hebrew word meant people of the soil, literally. It meant the rabble that does not know the law, the unclean ones, the filthy ones. So you cannot be a disciple of a learned rabbi and associate with people who are part of the filth. I call that the junior high rule. If you're going to be my friend, you can't be hers. It was built into their culture. And so if Jesus ate with the unreligious and the irreligious, what situation did that put him in? But he approaches Levi and he says, follow me. And without hesitation, Levi follows him. He leaves his tax booth. He abandons his job. There is no turning back for him now. And I've got to ask this, because as I'm reading this and preparing for this morning, I was thinking, Tim, in your life, who is labeling you and writing you off? How about for you? And even more than that, and what will you do about it? Will you plead with him, please accept me? No, I'm okay. No, I'm cool. Or try to put on or change the way you act so that people will accept you? You know that that's a dead end, don't you? Because it makes you constantly dependent on what other people think of you. And very often it's the people who should not have that kind of influence on you. And so your self-esteem, your sense of worth, your poise and confidence as you walk through life is dependent upon other people. I'm not saying we should say, I don't care what they think of me. No, that's a different attitude. But we ought to know who we are. If you don't find your greatest meaning in your relationship with God, then you don't really know who you are. And you're vulnerable to define yourself by what others think of you and to be manipulated by them. Last night, this weekend, was my 50th high school reunion. Can you imagine that? I graduated from high school when I was 10 years old. And so Brenda and I we went Friday night to the social gathering, and last night we went to the reunion, and it was a wonderful time. And And I looked around and said, where'd all these old people come from? And then I came home and looked in the mirror and I said, where'd that old person come from? And you know, I've come to appreciate my classmates more and more as the years have gone on. There's a couple of them in here that I've always appreciated. And Bill and Linda Harkness, both from the class of '69. But there was one of our classmates that sat at our table, and she still thinks she's 18 years old. And just from conversations I've had with her and overheard at the table, I don't think she knows who she is yet. She's trying to find it. She's trying to find love in all the wrong places. But that'd be a good title for a country music song, wouldn't it? You know, she's not alone in that. So many people are wandering, they're aimless, they're trying to find meaning. All of us need that, don't we? And our Father in heaven is saying, I made you. I breathed into your little unformed body the breath of life, and you became alive. I've been watching over you. I love you and I want you with me forever. And I want you to live your life now on earth with purpose and confidence in knowing that you are loved by the one that really counts. And so that's what you do about those who label you and write you off. If we get aggressive and defensive and angry, it just confirms our self-doubts. If we allow ourselves to be manipulated, that doesn't work. But getting to know Jesus better and learning to see ourselves through his eyes, that's when you'll learn who you really are. But the second question that goes along with this, as we think about Levi, is who are you writing off and labeling? Are you making assumptions about a person based on, well, their age, their color, their accent, their political affiliation, their address? That's just as bad, isn't it? Do you develop an opinion of them based on whether they have tattoos or whether they don't have tattoos? Or whether their hair is pink or red or green? Remember our granddaughter Chloe last week? Her hair was, it wasn't just green, it was fluorescent green. Yes. Chloe's a senior this year at Roswell High School, and guess what colors her colors are? Green and black. And so she is going to enter her senior year with her hair the color of the school colors. She's going to have a good year, I think. You know that? But it's so easy to look at a person's outside and judge them. You know what I've tried to work on myself to do over the years? Of course, you know, where I started out, I graduated from high school and did get my hair cut for about 8 months. I looked like a hippie. I remember stopping at Penny's that fall, where I worked for 2 years as a stock boy, and all these women, you know, were like a bunch of mothers to me. And they said, "Timmy, you look like a hippie." I said, "But I don't take drugs." And they said, "But we know you, you know, and so we know who you are." And so from an early age, I learned to not look at somebody with long hair and make a judgment on them. But when I had it, I wore it. I want you to know that in my junior year in high school, I was sent down to the office because my hair was too long. That's right. I'm proud of that now. Oh, boy. Well, Jesus actually made a judgment about Levi. He looked at Levi and he said, that guy needs a friend. He needs a friend who's the Son of God, who can forgive him, who can give his life meaning. And he said, Levi, come follow me. And the good news is, when he says that to us, follow me, he doesn't leave us where we are. He sees beyond the moment and who we are in this moment. He sees us as we can be. He calls us, he walks with us, and he changes us. By the way, do you know what other name Levi had? Anybody? Matthew. That's right, Matthew. Is that name more familiar? You thought I was talking about the guy who invented the jeans, didn't you? Nope. It was Matthew. And I know that that's familiar because, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the four writers of the Gospels. Imagine that. This guy who was hated, marginalized by all the good people, called by Jesus to be a disciple, gave up his career, he ends up being used by God to write one of the gospel accounts of Jesus' life. And from Matthew's gospel, we learn that he's a very skilled writer. We also learn that he is very, very knowledgeable in the Old Testament law. Because Matthew's gospel account quotes the Old Testament more than any of the other gospels do. And of course, you know what the Bible of the early church was, don't you? It was the Old Testament scriptures. It was Genesis to Malachi. They didn't have Matthew to Revelation yet. And also, we learn this about Matthew, Levi. He wasn't boastful about the sacrifice that he made to follow Jesus. Because in Mark's account that we're reading from today, it simply says, Levi got up and followed him. Matthew's gospel says the same thing, except he uses his name Matthew. Matthew got up and followed him. But Luke, who very often gives us more detail, he's the detail guy in the Gospels. He says, and Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Now, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they can always go back to fishing, you know? And I'm going to guess that they did. I don't know a fisherman who would ever say, I'm never going to fish again in my life. Do you? No. Now, they might say, I'm going to become a follower of Jesus, so I'm going to stop lying about how big the fish were that I caught. Yeah, but we do know that these guys actually did go back and fish occasionally. I mean, at the very end, after the death of Jesus, they went back fishing. But Levi, when Levi walked away from this job, he could never come back to it. And oh, he had a lucrative job. And don't you know that his lifestyle changed radically? Wow. What a decision he made in that instant. This makes me think of people who've done that. Honestly, I never had to do that. I had a job as a janitor when Jesus said, come follow me. I didn't make bad money, but you know, you could live pretty well on $450 a month. In 1970, especially when you're renting from your dad for $35 a month. That's... And I didn't have to worry about going back to that job, although I got to say, when I left the job, my boss said, if you ever want your job back, you've got it. Well, that was comforting, but I said, I'm not going to need it. But Levi, it was different for him. It made me think of Don Schoendorfer. Don's a native of Ashtabula. Don earned a PhD in mechanical engineering, medical engineering. Brilliant guy. Worked in the medical equipment business in Los Angeles, designing, I'm sure, like joints and stuff like that, and equipment for heart surgeries and all kinds of stuff, and made a lot of money. And went out on vacation one time to Ethiopia, or to Morocco rather, and it changed his life. He saw a guy with no legs dragging himself in the dust across the road on his knuckles. And he thought that guy should have some kind of a wheelchair, some kind of a device for mobility. But he pushed that out of his mind because, you know, something like that can eat at you, and so he didn't let it eat at him. He just went back to his lavish lifestyle and his rewarding job, and 6 or 7 years later it came back to him. He's sitting in church one Sunday, and the minister's talking about serving God and about the needs in the world, and Don is running through his mind. He's overcome with emotion and he can't get it out of his mind. And so for a year, he recruited a friend. They started working on a design for a wheelchair that would be cheap to build, it would be durable, it would be easy to ship and put together in a foreign country. And they come up with this wheelchair. I wish I had a photo to show you today. I didn't think of it, but it's a steel frame, steel-tubing frame, and it uses mountain bicycle tires, and it uses one of those white plastic outdoor chairs. You know what I'm talking about? And it's trimmed down, and it bolts onto this frame, and it comes with a tire pump, with the assembly kit, and he found a company in China that could build them for about $35 a piece. And he quit his job. And he began a ministry to make these chairs and to get them shipped by shipping containers to other countries. And he told his daughter, said, you know that convertible I was going to buy you when you graduated from college? Well, that's not going to happen. And they scaled down their lifestyle, way down. Because he found a much higher purpose in life. He was like Levi. And we proudly call him the son of Ashtabula County. And when Brenda and I were in Nicaragua one time, we'd set up for an eye clinic, and 2 people came wheeling in on those chairs. That was thrilling. Amazing. And they're going all over the world, and they're easy to maintain, and if the tire goes flat, you can fix it. And they'll go over rough terrain. It was brilliant. So he used his brains and his passion to do something like that. Levi saw something greater ahead of him. And suddenly, he canceled the order for his Ferrari. And he said, I found something much more fun than a Ferrari. I found a life with purpose. But you see, when Jesus did things like this, it always caused trouble for him. You know what? If he had had a good, maybe marketing advisor or political advisor, he never would have chosen a guy like Levi. Can you imagine what his critics said about him because of this? Well, we know exactly what they said. They called him a friend of sinners. Jesus had this wry sense of humor. I guess that's one thing I like about him. he often injected satire into his teaching. I'm not sarcasm. There's a big difference between satire, which is a very clever kind of humor, and sarcasm, which is negative and hurtful. You know, he said things like, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. You remember that saying, don't you? And we theologians, we tried to figure that one out, you know, so it was not so impossible. The needle, well, that was one of the gates to the city of Jerusalem. And it means that a camel, to get through that, had to bend down and get into that's not what it's talking about. He was literally trying to envision a camel being thrust through the eye of a needle, of a knitting, or of a sewing needle. It's impossible. He's talking about the only way you can be saved, anybody actually, is because of the grace of God as expressed in the death of Christ on the cross. Or one time he said, you blind guides, in Matthew 23, he says, you stray out a gnat, but swallow a camel. I mean, can you imagine that? You're eating a bowl of cereal, and you see a bug in it. What are you going to do? Say, add a little protein. No, you're going to pull that thing out. Some of you would just dump the whole thing out. You know, some of us say, the rest of it's fine. He didn't eat very much of it. But can you imagine that? You pull a little gnat out of there and get rid of that, but there's a camel sitting in your bowl of cereal. And you say, just eat the cereal. That's what he's picturing. I mean, it's absurd. It's extreme. It's hilarious, but it makes the point. And I'm sure that when he said things like that, there were, people were snorting and snickering as they were listening to him. And I'm also sure there were some grinding of teeth, because there were always some people and some tendencies that were targeted by these sayings. And some people just take things so literally they have no sense of humor. I came upon something recently that I can't get out of my mind. Has anybody ever heard of the site? There's a website for it. They've got a presence on Facebook. It's called the Babylon Bee. I recommend you look it up, Babylon Bee. Some of you have heard of The Onion, which is a satirical news site. Well, the Babylon Bee is a Christian satirical site. And they have the most clever writers in the world. But recently, they had a headline in one of their articles, CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin news before publication. And Snopes.com, that service that does fact-checking, they fact-checked the article. And they determined that it was fake news, and so Facebook sent a warning letter to the Babylon Bee that there were serious errors in their article and that they might have to be taken off from Facebook. What? Don't you get satire? I mean, every now and then I will share one of those Babylon Bee articles on Facebook, and I'll always have somebody say, Tim, did you realize that that's not true, that's just satire? No, I didn't realize that. Of course, I always put a comment and said, wow, look at this news. Make it act like I think it's true. That's satire as well. I'm sorry. It's a character defect that no matter how I try, I cannot overcome. And unfortunately, my son got infected with it. Probably the second year he was teaching, one of the English teachers gave an assignment to the students, and they interview one of the teachers and then write a little short biography story. And so a couple of girls came to Micah and said, Mr. Kraus, can we interview for this interview? So he told them he'd been married like 5 times and he had 10 children, that he had a glass eye and 1 artificial leg. And as he went on telling these things, it got more and more and more absurd until nobody could believe this. But they did. The teacher later came to Micah and said, Micah, I know what you did. Those girls believed everything you told them. One time I told Micah, I said, you know what, your mom and I always felt that God gave us children for our entertainment. And he said, that explains a lot about my teaching. Anyways, Jesus was the master of satire. And so, when those who were considered the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, said to his disciples, and you know what was happening, because he's at this dinner party at Levi's house. And some of the Pharisee teachers, they don't talk to Jesus about it, and they don't say, how come you're eating with sinners? No, they talk to his disciples, maybe as they're leaving. They say, hey, come here, master eats with sinners and tax collectors. But Jesus knew what they were saying, and so he says this. It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Just think about that for a moment. Who are the real sinners in this case? Aren't they the religious people who think they're so good? Huh? And imagine a doctor coming out into his waiting room, or her waiting room, and saying, hey, what are all you sick people doing here? Get out of here! I want healthy people in my office. And that's kind of what the Pharisees were saying. And Jesus says, send the sick to me. I want weird and twisted and broken and shattered people. I want folks who've got a lot of trouble in their life, who don't know who they are and are all confused and they keep messing up their lives. Those are the people I want. Aren't you glad about that? Because that's what we are as a church. We're people who are like that, and we're still a little bit like that, but we've made some progress, We've made steps. Some of us have been working at it longer than others have. And so maybe we've made a little more progress, and then we do something foolish and we realize, goodness, if I even started on that journey. But we remember, wait a minute, he said, I came not to call the healthy, but the sick. I'm sick, Lord, please help me. And we know he's not going to be saying, I don't know. I've kind of reached my quota of patience. You know what? I got enough people like you. Give me some good people that are easy to deal with. We know he's not going to do that. Ever! He's not going to do that. He's going to say, I need more Levi's. I need more people who everybody else despises. Because I love them. You know, what's interesting about this? He also loves the people who think they're so good, who have an overly high opinion of themselves. He loves them. He wants them to realize the truth so he can help them. And so, we're welcome. We are all welcome. I'm not going to say you're welcome because I've got to include myself with it. And not only did he welcome them, but he attracted them. This has always blown my mind. The very idea that the most pure and holy person who ever walked on the face of the earth was attractive to people who had done the most horrible things, who were so ashamed of themselves because they knew when they came to him, he would love them and accept them and forgive them and transform them. Because the normal reaction is you keep away from people like him because you know they're going to judge you. And that's not Jesus. You know that statement about Jesus having dinner with Levi? Isn't that an interesting parallel to Zacchaeus, another tax collector who was had, what was it? He was height challenged, I guess is the way to put it now. So he climbed up into a tree to see Jesus as he was going by, and Jesus saw him and says, "Come on down, I'm going to your house today." And so God invites himself to the home of a tax collector. And what does the tax collector do in this case as well? He invites his friends. He invites his rowdy friends to have lunch with Jesus. Wow. And let me remind you of what it says in Mark's account, Mark chapter 2. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. William Hendrickson, a wonderful, experienced commentator in the Scriptures, he examined the grammar, the context, and the phrasing in Greek of this, and he translated the passage this way. For there were many who were beginning to follow him. And who is he talking about? The antecedent today is the sinners and tax collectors. They were beginning to follow him. So get this picture. Levi, this outcast, is invited to follow Jesus. He invites Jesus to a dinner party and invites all of his friends. And then what we have is this movement that starts happening among Levi's friends where they also are getting to know Jesus and they're beginning to follow him. Wow. Jesus wasn't there at that dinner party so he could learn how to sin. He wasn't hanging around with them because it looked like they were having more fun than he was. No. First of all, I think he was there because he enjoyed people. I heard Friday night, a couple of my classmates that grew up went to a different elementary school than I did, and they said they were talking about their teacher that they had in first grade and then third grade again. And then to their horror, this teacher showed up again in seventh grade. And she finally, later in life, confessed, I never did like children. I never should have been a teacher. They said, "Oh yeah, we knew that." That wasn't Jesus. He actually likes people. He likes good ones and bad ones, and people who are every shape and size and color and opinion. He likes them. And that's why people were drawn to him. He didn't walk in there with, the halos. That's an artistic expression to indicate his deity. And it's a good one. But if you misunderstand it, you think that he's always floating kind of a foot off the ground, like this. And that wasn't Jesus. I'm not saying that he came walking in there cursing and swearing so he'd fit in. That's not Jesus either. I'm saying that when you looked him in the eyes and he looked at you, you could tell that he actually cared about you. He liked you. He didn't feel like he was swatting you aside, but that he was saying, "Hey, I want to be your friend." And it was a friendship that changed me. So, it's no wonder that they said this about him. This is his statement. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, "Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." That was their accusation of him, which he embraced. He's quoting it. So, do you have some rowdy friends that you're embarrassed to bring here? Bring them. Do you have some that you're afraid if they came, they're going to say some things that you're not supposed to say in church? We've already got folks that do that, so what's the difference? What would Levi do? After meeting Jesus, it changed what he would do. What would Jesus do? Actually, you are here because Jesus invited you. He tapped you on the shoulder and he said, you need something more in your life. You need some direction and purpose. You need to come to my presence so you can find out what life is really about. That's why. You think it's one of us who invited you? Actually, no, it goes way beyond that. And many of you came and you said, oh, you folks are so friendly. That wasn't us. Because see, if we just revert to our natural selves, then we're going to be looking and say, what was that? But we've been learning to look at people like Jesus does, and we say, oh, wow! So neat to have you here, so neat to meet you. And instead of saying, well, what do we have in common with that guy? We now look at it and say, wow, let's find something in common. Let's be friends. Isn't that a better way to live anyways? Don't you enjoy people better that way? On top of that, if we are ever going to have an influence in this world, and the people that we're in contact with, it's going to be because we learn to look at them the way Christ does. And we're going to see who they can be in Him. And we're going to care for them. And we're going to enjoy them. And we're going to laugh with them. And when they go through sad times, we're going to cry with them. And we're going to be genuine. We're going to be vulnerable. And we're going to find times to say things that we would not say to people. Things like, what, I have that weakness as well, and I struggle with it every day. And they're going to say, you? I can't believe that. I'm going to say, that's true. God helps me, but I can't say that it's all gone. And they're going to suddenly feel a little more relaxed around us. And they're going to say, okay, I got someone who understands me. Someone who's, when they say, I'll walk with you, I'll help you with this, they actually mean it because I am them, and they are me. So, if you've thought of yourself as a sinner, then you're in good company, because you're the kind of people that Jesus likes. You see, when he said that famous statement, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. He didn't say, everybody who's good enough will have everlasting life. He said, I came to give my life for you so that you can have everlasting life. And so he says, I want sinners so that I can forgive them, and then we can begin this walk to eternity together and have a great time along the way. That's what he said. And he's our friend. A friend who loves us so much that he didn't just say, I'll be there for you. He was there for us. He is there for us. He will never leave us or forsake us. You could not have a better friend. Ha. So I want you to feel comfortable in his presence. I also want you to feel like I am challenged in his presence. To take it a step higher. To do a little better. To keep my eyes focused on him. To see who he is and let that rub off on me. To see people and not make a snap judgment about them, but to say, oh, that's an interesting person. I'd like to get to know him better. And then in so doing, find somebody that's a whole lot more complicated than he looked like at first look. And who needs Jesus as much as I do. If we're ever going to reach people like Jesus did, and like Levi did, that's the way we're going to have to be. How about you? Do you feel you're his friend? Have you embraced him as friend? He's been tapping you on the shoulder. Sometimes your shoulder's sore from it. He's saying, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. And you said, maybe someone today. I got a few more taxes to collect here. A little bit busy here. I'm kind of involved with some things I'm ashamed of here, and I don't really want to help in overcoming those. And he taps you on the shoulder and says, follow me, follow me, follow me. You ready to follow me? We're not here just to go through a pretty little service and then go home and say, fulfilled my obligation what the church says. I'm here to change her. So, we're going to sing a song. I'm not going to twist your arm or persuade you. But if we can help, we're here to help.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back. Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? No turning back, no turning back. Praise God from whom all